to it over the last couple of decades. A lot of state attorneys general say they don't like that arrangement. They think it creates a kind of umbrella for the Sacklers and Purdue that could prevent future prosecutions.
Wow. How are communities that are hard hit by opioids supposed to get the money from this deal?
It's a big problem.
A lot of that is still, we're going to have to see how the details of this process works. What the Justice Department said today is that this will provide extraordinary resources. They also say that under this newly organized public trust company, opioid medications will continue to be provided. Remember, these medications do actually have a medical purpose when they're prescribed appropriately.
Yeah, for cancer
this
patients
will route resources
who are suffering indescribable pain
and funds to many of those communities.
Brian, thanks for the update. Always appreciate it.
Very good. Thanks, Steve.
That's NPR addiction correspondent Brian Mann on
Addiction
news
correspondent.
today of a settlement between the government and the new
Fuck all there is on the radio is lousy, bloody bad news. At least I got some sleep last night. Oh, by the way, this is Don Stacy's YouTube channel where I discuss anything and everything off the top of my head. That's what a philosopher does. He doesn't play favorites. Anything and everything. In fact, it just occurred to me a moment ago that I might initiate a correspondence with someone in Iran. Private citizen. I remember when I worked for George Hansen, well, indirectly, he owned the Copycat in Pocatello, and George Hansen had some fame and infamy. He was a congressman from the southeastern district of Idaho, which is where I lived for 25 flipping years. Right next to what I call the braking station. That wasn't quite the name for it. The railroad folk, they had a name for it called the hump. Those box cars, they'd be shoved up with the locomotive up the hump, and at the very top, and this guy in a tower, he's looking at the entire situation, and they divert those trains to various tracks. They must have at least a dozen different tracks from which down off the hump these cars can be diversified or distributed, or however you want to put it. They reassemble trains for transport later on. So it's a very complicated process, but I only lived about 2 blocks away from this thing. There was endless fucking noise day and night. Fucking drove me fucking insane. My kids, it didn't even bother them because they were little tykes when we moved into the place. But it drove me fucking crazy. I could hear that fucking train system going on day and night. And one time I went over there at night, just took a stroll over there. It was in August or something, late at night. And could hear the crickets churning away, you know. And I got as close to the hump as I could, you know, without trespassing on railroad property. And I just stood there and watched these succession of oil tankers on the railroad being shoved up to the top of the hump, and then down they slide, and the controller in the tower puts on the brakes, and they have these little, I guess, I can't think of anything else, they have these little sticks of dynamite, this is what I understand, that slam the brake against the steel iron wheel of the boxcar to slow it down. So you'd hear these little popping sounds all the time. And and never forget the squealing of the steel of the iron wheel on the iron track. That's grinding down that fucking track and making this horrendous, high-pitched, screaming screech. I lived about 3 blocks from this motherfucking place. But it was a lovely house and we had a little park in front, so. And then, bought, down the line, about, I don't know, 15 years later after we bought that place in 81, about 96 or around in there, they moved that whole operation to Portland. And all these people started, the locomotive engineers, they had two choices, and all the railroad workers involved with that operation. It was a huge operation. There are a lot of men hired that worked for the railroad in Pocatello, and believe you me, that was a labor town. That was a stronghold of democratic thinking in a red state, Pocatello, Idaho State University. An oasis of democratic thought in a sea of Republican stupidity. And I lived in that town for 25 years, but I loved it because it was literally surrounded by public land. There was so much public land there you couldn't even imagine. And I loved it. I loved to walk over that land. Oh. I wish I were there right now. I'd go on a hike. But you can always remember. I don't know what this pandemic is going to do to us, but it's going to uncover many, many ills or discrepancies or inequalities in our country. They're becoming visible already. For example, I heard on the radio just a moment ago a woman who sounded like a black woman who apparently is a sanitation engineer. That's a vital occupation, vital profession actually. You have to get a 4 or 5 year degree to be a sanitation engineer, to know how to run a facility that processes human waste and all that. It's a big problem in human society, and most people don't even think about it. This is tobacco. I took all my cigar butts and unwrapped them. Now I got a nice little jar of tobacco. I'm going to buy a pipe. I should have never taken up smoking, but I always insisted to my friend in Pocatello, Will Peterson, who has a bookstore there, Walrus and Carpenter bookstore. Used to go in and hang out there and talk. I told him one time, well, nicotine's a stimulant, Will. Why do you think many of the physicists smoke pipes? It stimulates their brain. And he laughed and he scoffed at that, and he said, oh, yeah, there are no benefits at all to nicotine. He says, no, well, he didn't say nicotine, he said tobacco, or cigarettes, or whatever. Well, cigarettes are filled with processed tobacco, but the shredded pipe tobacco is very good. It's unprocessed. It's just tobacco. That's all it is. And it has very, very unusual biochemical properties when people smoke it. Some of these properties, some people aren't even aware of. But the thing is, to learn about these substances and how they affect you as an individual, I'll give you a good example. Now, me, I've weighed up between 155 and 160 pounds for most of my life. Even now, right now, I weigh 155 pounds, which is exactly my body weight when I was a high school kid, 17 years old. Not too many men can say that. You weigh the same when you were a senior in high school? How many can say they do? Not many. Especially in this opulent country of ours, this opulent country of vast resources, which we seemingly are unable to share equitably.